Is Russia scaling back its military in Ukraine? Both Kiev and Washington doubt it, in spite of Moscow's pledge to reduce operations near the capital and Chernihiv. So, is the Kremlin withdrawing troops or repositioning its forces? I'm Andrea Sankey, and today's newsmaker is Moscow's military strategy in Ukraine. Ahead of the high-stakes peace talks in Istanbul on Tuesday, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said it was time for concrete results. Now, while neither Russia nor Ukraine agreed to a ceasefire, Moscow did announce it would be reducing its military operations around Kiev and Chernihiv.
Due to
the fact that the talks about the Treaty on Neutrality and Nuclear-Free Status of Ukraine and on providing security guarantees for Ukraine are moving to a practical phase and taking into account all the principles discussed today, the Russian Defense Ministry, in order to increase mutual trust and create the necessary conditions for further negotiations and achieving the ultimate goal of agreeing and signing the above-mentioned treaty, made a decision to radically, by a large margin, reduce military activity in the Kiev and Chernihiv directions.
But many remain skeptical of Russia's pledges, especially the US and Ukraine. Both questioned Moscow's real intentions, warning what Russia says is often not what it does.
So we ought not be fooling, and nobody should be fooling ourselves, by the Kremlin's now recent claim that it will suddenly just reduce military attacks near Kyiv, or any reports that it's going to withdraw all its forces. Has there been some movement by some Russian units away from Kyiv in the last day or so? Yeah, we think so. Small numbers. But we believe that this is a repositioning, not a real withdrawal.
Yes, we can call the signals we hear from the negotiating platform positive. But these signals don't drown out the blows of Russian shells. Of course, we see all the risks. Of course, we see no reason to trust the words of certain representatives of a state that continues to fight for our destruction. Ukrainians are not naive people.
Well, clearly, Kiev and Washington are cautious, but is their skepticism justified? Well, soon after Moscow made the pledge to reduce military activity, its forces were accused of continuing their onslaught in Chernihiv. The city's governor, Vyacheslav Chaus, says there has been no let-up in attacks, and his city was still being bombarded. According to the Kremlin, its main focus is eastern Ukraine, where Russian-backed separatists already control a significant amount of territory, and the fighting has taken a devastating toll on civilians.
I was just sitting on the couch, and bang! The window glass popped, the frames came off. I didn't even understand what happened. The flat was full of smoke. I was getting choked by this gas, this smoke, and the kitchen door was all twisted. And so is the bathroom door, and nobody was answering anywhere.
Let's get more perspective now as to what's happening on the ground in Ukraine. And joining me from the west of the country is the mayor of Kopychyntsi, Bogdan Kelichavyi. Thank you so much for being with us. Now, from what I understand, you've been at least spared the military destruction that others in your country have been subjected to. But instead, you've seen the human suffering firsthand via welcoming thousands of displaced people to your town. So tell us how you're feeling now that Russia says it's reducing troop numbers in and around Kiev, at least. Are people where you are feeling any safer?
Hi there. First of all, thank you for hosting me here. And now I have to work as a man in a new reality. And of course, I'm not sure that, and I'm not feeling any safer than that Russian troops are moving from Kiev, because everybody is talking here that they're moving to Mariupol and Kharkiv, and they're not leaving Kharkiv, so they're trying to cut another part of Ukraine. Here in western part of Ukraine, we're not on the front lines, but we're receiving internally displaced people, and we're sending our soldiers to the front line. And today, actually, we have one soldier who is confirmed dead, and this is a very sad day for us.
But in essence, you really do share the cynicism of your government and of the United States that Russia isn't sincere about withdrawing troops per se, but rather repositioning them.
Yeah, that's what everybody here is talking about, at least.
Okay. Tell me, I know that you have organized members of your community to defend Ukraine, to take up arms. Tell us, how far are you prepared to go to defend your territory? People are armed and trained, as you said. These are your friends among them.
Yeah, so basically, I cannot talk a lot about that, but we have soldiers that are going to the front lines, and also everybody who is staying here, we're training them and training them to transform from being civilians to be ready for being fighters and to be sent to the front lines as well to protect our land right here.
And do you think that is the only hope, really, Ukraine has at this point, that its people are willing to fight, even civilians that have never touched a firearm in their lives?
Yeah, we have a very strong spirit, and we really value our freedom. So the main job is who is doing here is our own people. But we also thank to everybody, and we thank Turkish people and Turkey for any support that your people are providing to us, because this is not only our war, this is the world war with humanity.
So tell me, now that you mentioned Turkey, and I'm sure you watched the talks in Istanbul on Tuesday rather closely. Were you left with a sense of optimism at all?
As a mayor, I have to be optimistic, and I have to express optimism to my citizens, because one of the biggest enemies for us is panic. So, of course, I'm very confident, and I really believe in our armed forces and our volunteers and everybody and the international community. And I really hope that the international community will stand strong, and we will win and we'll protect our freedom, and we'll be able to live normal life like any other neighboring country.
Right. Sometimes, as they say, beauty comes out of tragedy. And you have seen how people have united in defense of your country and how they've really helped each other when it comes to so many displaced people that you've taken into your town. Tell us more about that and what you've learned about your people since this conflict started.
Since the war started, a lot of people started behaving differently, and we got very united, and everybody is volunteering. So basically, we have every couple of minutes, somebody's coming to my city hall and asking how can we help, because they're tired of watching news all the time, so they want to get involved. And we don't have any opposition. We don't have any political discussion here anymore. Everybody is so focused on getting our beautiful country free. So we also have a lot of internally displaced people, and they are brilliant. They are helping us. Even they lost their homes. A lot of them, they lost their homes. Some of them came wounded here, but they all are trying to help our community. They help our country, and everybody is doing whatever they can.
Okay, that's good to hear. Mayor of Kopychyntsi, Bogdan Kelichavyi, thank you so much for being with us on The Newsmakers. Well, let's talk further now about how Russia may move forward, and we'll welcome three new panelists. Iuliia Osmolovska is a defense and security analyst and the chairperson of the Transatlantic Dialogue Center. Luke Coffey is the director of the Allison Center for Foreign Policy Studies at the Heritage Foundation in Washington. And completing our panel from Moscow is Sergey Markov, a political analyst and former member of the Russian parliament. Thanks all so much for being with us. Luke, let me start with you and ask you to further explain Washington's cynicism. Why is it justified? And do you think it's productive while negotiations are still in such early stages?
Well, there's no evidence and there's no proof that there's been any major withdrawal of Russian forces from around Kyiv. And if you look at the track record, of Russia's behavior in the past when it comes to making these similar commitments. It's not a very good track record. In 2008, Russia signed a 6-point peace plan with Georgia. Today, they're still in violation of 2 of those 6 points. We saw the violation of the Astana agreement in Syria, and we have seen the violation of the 2 Minsk agreements in Ukraine. And this is just a few examples. So considering the battlefield impact of the Ukrainian defense against the Russian military around Kyiv, and considering Russia's track record of not living up to these commitments, I actually think that they are tactically withdrawing from Kyiv. They're not voluntarily withdrawing as any gesture of goodwill for the peace negotiations.
Okay, so this is something that probably would have happened anyway. Let me ask Sergey Markov if you think that cynicism is indeed justified given Russia's track record, and is Russia actually taking advantage of a lull of sorts, as some accuse it of, to regroup?
It's one of the things, a few things which I agree with our colleague from Washington. I don't think that it's a Russian step toward stopping of military operation. It's regrouping. Russia is more going to concentrate its attention to the surrounding and the crashing main group of Ukrainian army which stay in Donbass and which is responsible for numerous war crimes, basically. So after crashing this main group of Ukrainian army, Russia will start again its military operation to the Kharkiv and Odessa, who is mostly pro-Russian city of Ukraine, and then probably to Kyiv. I don't know. Kyiv is unique Ukrainian city. Most of the Russian-speaking cities of Ukraine pro-Russian. Most of those who are Ukrainian-speaking, they are anti-Russian. Kyiv is a unique Russian-speaking city, but anti-Russian. Well, I don't know how Russia will fix this situation, but generally, I agree with our colleague with this one point. It's a regrouping, crashing of biggest group of Ukrainian army, and then continuous liberation. War can be stopped very easily if one guy who is fully responsible for this war, Joe Biden, President of the United States, will say, we agree denazification of Ukraine.
Very interesting. I mean, aside from the last bit there, it's an interesting consensus to have heard between the two of you. But let me get Iulia's take on it, because, you know, we heard Russia's Deputy Defense Minister say this, they will do this radically by a large margin, you know, reduce military activity. I mean, what is this just a ploy, really, on behalf of the Kremlin to reposition troops and continue its assault on Ukraine then?
Well, first of all, I feel obliged to comment to what Sergey from Moscow said. You could hardly find any pro-Russian city at the moment in Ukrainian soil. And what I could say that you managed not to achieve denazification, but you probably united all the country around the issue of being Ukrainian patriot. And it will be very difficult for you to get at least some sort of at least neutral assessment attitude to Russians, not saying about some loyalty. So I congratulate you with achieving this big goal of getting Ukraine united, feeling themselves Ukrainians and more patriotic. So about the pessimistic comments on Russian withdrawal from Kiev, and actually I have to say I'm Kievite myself. I was born in Kiev, my parents were born in Kiev. And if you just know how Kievites are thinking about Russians these days, so I think that you will be very much disappointed with your illusions about how Ukrainians are thinking about Russia. So never use these arguments about pro-Russian city in Ukraine in any case. So with regard to the general repositioning of Russian troops around Kiev, I myself, as a former diplomat, can assess this within the framework of negotiations that are going on, and actually the recent round was happening on Turkish soil, which is a big achievement, I should say, because we moved the negotiation platform from Belarus, which is loyal to Russia, to a more neutral country, which doing the efforts to get this at least communication channel settled. But with regard to what everything was said there, so the Russian side, the head of Russian delegation, Mr. Medinsky, said that even this regrouping of Russian troops around Kiev and Chernihiv doesn't mean ceasefire. So no ceasefire had been achieved. Even interim ceasefire hadn't been achieved during yesterday's talks. So, which says about Russian political will of actually getting into some sort of agreement with Ukraine. So we also are not sharing a lot of optimism about this. We prepared for the second wave of Russian enforced attempts to try to at least to get some of Ukrainian soil, but I think that Russia has significantly lost its momentum, and they're getting on the defensive side right now.
Sergey, I do want to get your response to that, because we have heard before that many think Russia is working against its own best interests by really uniting the Ukrainian people rather than defending what it says are its own supporters within Ukraine's borders. Do you think, though, that you still have the support base you want from Russian, particularly Russian-backed separatists in the Donbass?
I fully disagree with Iuliia. She is a member of Euro-Atlantic Council, you know. She is, in fact, I would say, agent of United States of America and NATO in Ukraine. Of course, her propagandistic position is that all Ukrainians united against Russia and so on. But of course, it's falsified. In fact, people in Ukraine, they are divided, of course, over this issue. But the point is very easily. During many years, no one pro-Russian politician have been allowed to have no one demonstration, no one appearing on Ukrainian TV. It was fully blocked. And of course, terror, additionally to this, that's why pro-Russian people not able to express their opinion. But we know, we had a lot of letters from Ukraine, from the people who ask Russia to come and to liberate them from terrorists. And you can evaluate very easily how democratic Kiev regime is. It's a very easy example, absolutely easy. It's the issue of Russian language. The Russian language is the language of the full majority of Ukrainian people, but it's prohibited by Ukrainian government. Can you believe that majority can support prohibition?
Sergey, our time is very limited, and we do know Russia's position on what it believes its support base is in Ukraine. Let me come back to Luke then quickly, because Russia obviously still feels fully justified in what it's doing. So when we talk about trying to move this forward, looking for a ceasefire or a peace agreement, we know that what was done in 2014 obviously didn't hold up. It really just postponed a much larger conflict to come. And today we're now hearing about, at the best we can do, building a framework for peace. Is that going to be enough, or are we looking at a much more prolonged conflict?
Well, firstly, I just want to say that Iuliia is a Ukrainian patriot, not an American agent. I mean, you know, what do you expect? Someone who's having their country completely devastated, they're going to come out and they're going to defend their nation and their right for self-defense. But this idea that there's some sort of framework that exists for peace at this point is nonsensical. I mean, look at the images that are being shown on your screen while we sit here and talk. Is this liberation? You know, during the first week of the invasion of Ukraine, the university in Kharkiv was bombed by Russian forces, one of the oldest Russian-speaking universities in the former Russian Empire. And this is their liberation of the Russian-speaking people in Ukraine. The whole world can see it. This isn't the 1800s. We
Luca,
can all see this with our eyes.
I was actually asking,
happening.
I mean, the problem is there isn't even a framework. I mean, this is the only stage where it seems we're at now is talking about at least building a basic framework to get negotiations moving forward.
I think the sad reality is we're not at that point in this conflict. The Ukrainians are still fighting for their livelihoods. They're defending their houses, their families, their villages. And I don't think the Ukrainian people right now are ready for any framework. They're trying to stay alive. They're trying to eat. If you're in Mariupol, you're trying to just get through the day.
Okay.
So this idea that we can have some sort of constructive engagement between Ukrainians and Russians at this point, I just think is completely unrealistic.
So let's then talk about the other methods that might be possible. It looks like we've just lost Sergey. We'll try and get him back. Because, of course, sanctions have been one of the main tools here. But let me ask you, Iuliia and Luke and Sergey, all of you, I mean, are sanctions actually working? Because the ruble is not suffering as badly as many as had expected. China and India, still look to be the biggest customers of Russia's energy. So that is kind of propping up the economy more than any had expected. So it's not having the intended effect, the sanctions regime. What incentive, Iuliia, let me ask you, what incentive does Russia really have to compromise now if its economy is not doing as badly as the US in particular had hoped, and it does seem to be moving forward on taking regions that it at least wanted to claim in the east of the country? What incentive is there for Russia to compromise?
Well, I should say that about this negotiation framework as such, the very important thing is ripeness momentum for negotiation. So there is no ripeness so far. Russia is not ready to talk substantively on some peaceful settlement. But what might induce Russia to get into this moment of ripeness is the combination of different factors. So you shouldn't judge the sanctions effect as all alone effect, which could make Russia change their position. So here we have also international boycott of international business. A lot of countries, a lot of companies moving from Russian market. And sanctions, they are not already an inexhausted package. So they keep enrolling. And there are currently talks about having this oil and gas embargo from Russia. So if Russia turns for some Asian markets, okay, it's, they don't have so much choice to do, but this is not enough, not sufficient. And if you're talking about China, for instance, so for China, it's more important to have secure transportation ways to get to Europe through Russia, actually, and not just limit themselves to Russia, because even trade turnover of China with the European Union is more than 20% of general trade turnover, whereas Russia accounts less than 2%. So therefore, it means that Russia also, having lost this incentive on the ground, not very much being prepared for, and actually being forced to change their strategy, military strategy, and not just to claim about winning all the Ukraine, but some part of Ukraine. So it means that time plays against Russia at the moment, and in 2 weeks' time, Russia will be in more weakened position, also with the effect of sanctions. And not all of the sanctions, as they said, have been in place so far. So I wouldn't just limit the assessment that sanctions are not enough and Russians won't be doing,
Sergey, is Russia feeling the pressure?
Our discussion, very good model of the discussion between Russia and the United States. American, as our colleague, look at the member of NATO Council and saying, look, they are not agent of NATO, they are Ukrainian patriots. They look at as a
Sergey, you do continually highlight that anyone who doesn't speak in support of Russia is usually seen as a foreign agent. But go ahead with the question that I asked you. I mean, is Russia feeling the pressure? Is there an incentive to go forward with peace?
Of course, sanctions not a top only from NATO members. No one country joins this anti-Russian sanction except members of NATO and some junior partners of the United States, like Japan and South Korea. And we will cooperate with all of the global world except these United States allies. And I'm sure that Russian economy will be even more strong. And if you look at the attitude of Russian citizens, they believe that more enemies of Russia use sanctions against Russia, more will support Vladimir Putin and his military operation against enemies of Russia.
Okay, Luke, I can give you 30 seconds to reply. Go ahead.
Well, I would hardly describe countries like Japan, Singapore, or South Korea, some of the most advanced industrialized economies in the world, as junior partners to the United States. But the reality is it's too soon to see the full impact of these sanctions. These sanctions will take months, if not years, to be fully felt, especially when you have private companies pulling out of Russia as well. So let's just wait and see. I'm not very optimistic about the Russian economy right now, based off what I'm seeing, but we are in very early days, that's for sure.
Okay, we are, and we will be speaking about this, of course, again, I'm sure, in the very near future. But for right now, I'd like to thank all three of my panelists so much for being with us on this edition of The Newsmakers, and our viewers, of course, for tuning in as well. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. I am Andrea Sankey. We'll see you next time.